Welcome to the Heartland Running Podcast. Join Crystal, Andy, and Steven as they explore all things running related in the Heartland and beyond.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the show. I'm Crystal.
I'm Andy.
And I'm Steven.
And we are your hosts that take pride in our podcasting professionalism. Unlike those other shows, we vow never to giggle at terms such as nip guards, fartlick, or even uberlube.
Oh, I
Very
guess
nice.
I got to leave the show.
And I made it through without giggling, so I feel pretty good.
But you know we'll giggle at those terms. At least you didn't include meat stick.
You know, I thought about that, but I don't think I could have said that without giggling.
We'll fill our special guest in on that in a minute. Who do we have this evening, Crystal?
I am really excited. Tonight we have Dr. Nathan DeWall. He is a professor of psychology at the University of Kentucky, an author of a best-selling introduction to psychology textbook series, a regular contributor, to the New York Times and other national publications, and an avid ultramarathon runner. He has completed some of the most challenging ultramarathons on the planet, including the last annual Vol State 500K, which is 314 miles. He's done the 147-mile Marathon des Sables stage race in the Sahara Desert. And just recently, he just finished the Badwater 135 in Death Valley. He is also happily married to Alice DeWall and a devoted dad to 2 kids. He has Beverly, or Bevy, who is age 2, and the newest addition to the family is only 3 months old, baby Ellis. And when he isn't writing or running, he tends to his chickens on a small farm in Lexington, Kentucky. So welcome, Nathan.
Hey, thanks for having me. What a great introduction.
Nathan, do we need to get on? Do we need to get on sofas or something for this? You know,
no, it's normal guy. I had to stay around in school to get the job that I have.
Oh, and I was so ready to talk about my childhood.
And how does that make you feel?
Stop being a victim. You know,
suck it up, Buttercup.
Cupcake. Yeah.
Well, we also missed something from from his bio that he's also a courier. Because when the first time, actually, the only time we met Nathan in person was at Run Under the Stars, when he was gracious enough to run our Sword Energy direct to us when it wasn't going to make it to Stephen in time and then through the mail. So thank you. That saved us that night.
Yes,
too,
thank you very much.
Yeah, I think the proper term is that I was a drug mule. I gave you a small cardboard box filled with drugs to keep you awake at night. So I was the connection. I'm happy to say
he's our Lexington connection.
That's right.
The connection.
Now, Nathan, before we get into the meat and potatoes of the questions and conversation, you weren't always an ultra runner, were you? You had a transformation where you lost a lot of weight. What caused that?
I was, very early on in life, some of my earliest memories were running. And I was a very active child. My dad, he would let me train with him when he was training for the Sioux Falls Marathon in the early 1980s. And I was, like I said, very active. And in middle school, how they have you run the mile. I did that and I beat everybody. And so then I just became a runner because they said, if you can beat everybody, that means you're a runner. And so I made my way up and I did well in high school. And then when I went to college, I went to a very small college that really didn't have athletics. There were no athletic scholarships involved at my school. It's called St. Olaf College. And so I didn't remain active at all. In fact, I became quite sedentary. And thereafter, I remained very inactive. And it wasn't until 5 years ago that I made a seismic shift in my approach to my life, and specifically making health a top priority in my daily life. And since then, it's brought not only a transformation in my physical health and my mental health, but in really every other way that you could think of having a life, in terms of the activities that I find rewarding, the date nights that I have with my wife that sound appealing, and just the friends that I would want to have. And so it's been a transformation in every possible sense of the word.
Oh, that's outstanding. I know for me, I found it made me a better father, a better employee, just a better person all around. So I'm glad to hear you had a similar experience.
Yeah, there's, I think running is a very good way to, I say that I came for fitness and I stayed for the people. I really, especially with ultramarathoning, I fell in love with the people and the tribe of us who we all do different things. So you're in decorative concrete, Andy's to meat.
Meat processing.
He's the meat stick of the four of us. And Crystal does very great work in the public school system. We're all very different, but we all come, we wouldn't normally meet, but we come together and in a setting where none of that matters. It doesn't matter what you do or what degree you have or what you don't have or what you do, anything. You're there for a very pure reason. And I think that purity spills over into other areas of your life. At least it has for mine.
Yeah, whenever we try to talk with as many of our listeners as possible, mostly through social media, Instagram, and whatnot, and it's a common theme among most people that listen to the show is they've gotten healthy, they've maybe had a weight loss or at least a personal transformation. I know for me personally, if I were to boil it down, why I did this, why I am where I am, is that running itself made me a more disciplined person. And just like you said, how that spills over into the rest of your life. If you're disciplined in that aspect of your life, it's going to make everything else better, whether it be in your work, your relationships, and with your friends, your family, your wife, whatever. It's that discipline that's what I've gained from it.
Yeah, I think a lot of us can identify with that. And it's funny. I think that this is you can sort of, when I think of my life's, spread out on a long road, it's hard to believe, but I had very good self-discipline, just not related to my health. Mm-hmm. And so, I wasn't intending on even going to college. And then it was my father said, maybe you should go for a year. And so I took him up on it and I've never left. I got to a point in my schooling where, a professor of mine said, if you like what we're doing in this class, you can get a PhD. And I said, what's that? And he explained what it was. And I said, well, nobody in my family has ever done that. And so I just sort of said, well, I'm going to do that no matter what. And I put my mind to it. And 5 years later, I had one. And I've done that in a couple of other areas of my life. And so for me, it's like I always had the hardware. I just didn't have the software related to health. And for me, for school, if it's with work, if it's with anything, the number one motivator to make a substantial change is pain and discomfort. It's like as soon as the pain becomes great enough, I'm going to be willing to do something. Unless the pain is not even getting my attention, I'm just going to sweep it under the rug.
So what was that trigger point that made you get control of your health? I mean, I can tell you the exact moment I decided enough of this, I need to take charge of this. Did you have that pivotal moment?
Oh yeah. I mean, so this is what it was. So it was, me going to a weight loss class, not for me, but to support my wife who wanted to improve her health. And I had never even thought about my health. And I stepped up and they said, you want to step on the scale? And I said, sure. I had no idea what it was going. And they looked at it and they looked at what the number said and they said, oh, you're obese. And I said, no, I'm tall. There's no way I can be. And they said, okay, how tall are you? And I said, I'm 6'2". She said 6'2". And she said, and she put her finger down and then she slid it all the way over. And she said, you are tall and obese. And it was just like, it's the truth. There was no arguing with her. And that was just a wake up. And after that, I got, some blood work done and filled out a short assessment questionnaire. And the results basically said that, Nathan, you're not going to live as long as you. And it's because of actions that and these are things that you can change, and we'll show you how to change them. But if you keep on going on this track, you're not going to beat the house when it comes to your health. And that was a wake up call for me.
Outstanding. We all need those slaps in the face sometime.
Yeah.
And so that was only like 5 or 6 years ago?
That was 5 years ago. Yeah. So that was in May of 2012.
So within 5 years, you do a lot in 5 years. So that PhD in 5 years, and then this for 5 years, you went to kind of, being obese to running some of the toughest ultra marathons on the planet. I mean, that's huge.
Anyone can do it. I mean, I'm 100% convinced that most people can do that. It's just, are you willing to do the work and experience the pain and the discomfort that makes you want to quit? Are you just willing to say, I mean, no matter what, I will never stop. Like, you cannot stop me. And man, oh man, like from that perspective, it's like, oh, game on, Now, of course, it's not going to work with everything. I had to have some running ability, but I think most people have that at least some level. And you can work at it. There are things you can do. So yeah, I mean, 5 years, just what it took.
Now, why ultras? I mean, you can get in good shape running 10Ks. A marathon is a brutal distance on the road. Why go for these crazy, stupid distances that Crystal keeps talking me into doing?
I think it's the smartest thing that you can possibly do.
Thank you.
Honestly, for me, Stephen, it was an accident. It was a complete accident. I never, ever thought that I could run a marathon. I was raised in a house with lots of love, but really different ideas about health. Both of my parents have struggled with their health, over my childhood and in my adult life. And, after my dad ran that marathon in 1985, he hasn't run a step since. And he believes that marathon really, really, really did a job on him. He had a very typical first marathon experience, but what I would call a first marathon experience. But I was fed information from his perspective, his experience, that these are bad things. You should not do these. You should not do a marathon. And so what happened is I started eating better 5 years ago, and I started walking a little bit, and I started riding my bicycle. I bought a bicycle, and Alice and we have a date night every week. And instead of driving, we would ride a bicycle to wherever we were going to go. And that was a new activity that we did that we had never done before as a couple. And then we started reading books related to health. That's a novel concept. I literally didn't know that they had books related to this stuff. And so what happened was my wife, Alice, she was reading a book by a guy named Scott Jurek, who is a famous ultramarathon runner. It was called Eat and Run. And in that book, he talked about running 100-mile races. And he talked about running the Badwater 135. And she had also checked out a book by a guy named Dean Karnassus, and it was called Ultramarathon, Man. And he talked about running 100-mile races in the Badwater 135. And Alice said, you got to read these books. These people run 100 miles at a time. And sometimes they run across Death Valley, the hottest place on earth, nonstop in July. And so I read the books, and I said, so this was August of 2012. And I never run a marathon before. I hadn't really run a half marathon, but I said, I'm going to do the Badwater 135. And I said, I don't care what it takes. I don't care what I have to do. I don't care if it takes me 5 years. I'm going to do it no matter what. And I had no idea what I was getting in, but I did it.
Well, I've got a quick question for you, and maybe you can kind of unpack some baggage on me that I have discovered I do not like to do ultra marathons.
Yes, you do.
Now, I keep signing up for them. So I don't know why. But I think it's interesting because Stephen and Crystal, they really enjoy it, and they want to keep pushing the boundaries of their distance. They're going to do their first 100-miler coming up, and I'm happy with the marathon distance. I think that's great. I think it's hard, but I know that I have the ability to do them, except I don't know if it's a fear issue that you spoke about the pain earlier. The pain's going to come. It's going to hurt. I don't know if it's necessarily the fear that, okay, that's going to come and I don't know if I can push myself through it, or I don't know if I am going to get to the point where I'm going to quit, and I don't want to quit. How can someone kind of look at that and decide, what is that? What is it that's causing me to stop?
So you don't like them, huh?
Well, I like the idea of doing an ultra. I like the idea of completing them, and I have completed a few 50Ks. And whenever it's over, it's great. It's just that anticipation of, I don't know if I want to sign up for this or not, because I don't know if I'm going to enjoy it during the time, or I don't know if I'm going to be able to complete it. Whenever I know physically I have the ability to complete it.
Yeah. I'm a very bad example of what to do. Like, I would never encourage anyone to read about something in a book that 780 people have ever done and then just say, I'm going to do that. I mean, that's just, and I'm going to do it in a short period of time. For me, that was the right path, because that's kind of how I'm wired. Like, I've always kind of been like, I think that you have to do what gets you going, man. It's just like, like when I think of an event or something that gets me revved up, and that I'm talking to my friends about it, and that when I wake up, I'm thinking about it, and it doesn't consume my life, but it adds, and it's like, find that one thing and then just do it no matter what. Now, maybe it's a marathon, maybe it's a half marathon, maybe it's a 5K.
Yeah.
I don't really think it matters what you do. For a lot of people, it's simply getting out of the door. Like I'm scared of doing any exercise. That's what a lot of people talk to me. And I say, I know exactly what you're talking about. And so for me, that thing was the Badwater 135. For you, it's something completely different. But it's like, I think that was what, I would never, ever give somebody advice, but I can definitely share my experience, which is finding that one thing or a few things that really gets you going, and you do it. And you're like, what was that like? Do I want to do that again? And then you do it again, and then you do it again, and you do it again. And then you're going to reach one point where you're at a fork in the road, and you're like, maybe I want a little bit more. This is so good. I just want a little bit more. And then the sky's the limit. And so that's my experience. And so a lot of these people who do races like the Badwater 135 or Barkley or the Ball State race or Marathon des Sables, once they do it, they want more. And so you see them, doing a Badwater double. They get done doing the 135, and then they turn around and then they run the whole course in reverse. I ran with a guy this year who did that, and he's done that 11 years in a row. It's there's always going to be someone doing more than you and doing it faster. If you're like me, an average runner, there's always going to be someone doing more, doing it faster, doing it bigger, doing it better. And that just doesn't matter. I just need to find my one thing that I really, really want to do. And so for me, that was Badwater. And now, I love to go back in years, but now I got some other stuff I really am excited about and that I'll want to do.
So is Barkley's on the radar for 5 years?
No.
Now that's saying something.
So in order to do the Barkley marathons, I think that you need a skill set that I neither have nor am interested in building, which is one where you can navigate. You can find your way out of any place. And I am profoundly poor at that. So I've lived in Lexington, Kentucky for 10 years now. And I was dropping my daughter, Bevy, off at the sitter 2 weeks ago. And I didn't plug it into the GPS. And true story, I was asking my 2-year-old for directions after about being lost for about 15. She said, "Daddy, where are we? Where are we?" She didn't recognize this neighborhood. I said, "Does this look like the right place? Are we supposed to turn here?" So I have, it would be at this point, I have no business applying to do the Barkley marathons.
I agree with you. Well, let's get into Badwater, because I know that was your your big dream race. I'd like to hear some experiences, and in particular, in any race, there's highs and lows. So I was kind of interested, how low did you actually get, and what did you do to bring yourself out of that low?
It's funny. I think, initially and throughout the race, it was almost a continual high, because it was like, am I really here? Am I really doing this? A friend of mine, I asked him advice. I said, going into this, what advice would you give me? And he said, get involved in all of the hype before the race, but when the race starts, just forget about it. And I got to tell you, I was on that course for 41 hours and it never quit. It was a dream the entire time. Now, it was hard. It was profoundly difficult. And were there low times? Of course there were. But at no point did I ever think of quitting. And at no point did I ever think, I've got no business being out here. Now, there were a couple of times, I think 2 points in the race were one was scary and one was very difficult. The whole thing is really hard. So do you want to hear scary or difficult first?
Crystal, you choose.
Let's go scary.
Okay, cool. So I know the listeners are probably, I don't know what time of night you're listening to this. It's very late at night that we're taping this. So it's appropriate that we're talking about scary stuff at night. So the Badwater 135 is a nighttime start. So there are 3 different waves. There's an 8 p.m. wave, a 9:30 p.m. wave, and an 11 p.m. wave. And so what that means is that the race, which is already 2-day cutoff, a 48-hour cutoff, now involves even more sleep deprivation, because no matter what, you're going to wake up in the morning and you're not going to be able to get back to sleep. I didn't meet one person who could get back to sleep because you're so darn excited. And so I got up at 9:30 that morning and I was awake virtually until I finished. And so in my experience, and even in 100-mile races, I hallucinate. I've hallucinated several times. So when I was doing a 100-mile race in Indiana, part of the course went by a lake, and I heard a pitter patter in the lake, and I looked and I saw an alligator in Indiana, and I was terrified, absolutely terrified. It nearly ended my race. And my crew was there, my wife was there, and I said, I can't go back out there. If I go back out, I'm going to die. And they fed me some Reese's Pieces, and it solved the problem. At Badwater, what happened was I was running. It was so we started at 9:30. I get to about mile 40. So now it's about 5 in the morning. 5, like the sun is coming up, 5:30. And I look over to the left and I see a woman. So my crew's on the road, but up in the hills, there's a woman. And she's just looking into the sun, looking into the sky, and she's wearing a long robe. And I asked my crew, I pointed to her and I said, she's real, isn't she? She's real. She's really there. And they looked and they said, yeah, she's there. And so I said, okay, this is good. This is good. I'm not hallucinating. It's too early in the race to start hallucinating. Fast forward 40 miles and I've run a lot longer. I've done 2 mountain passes. I've run through the lake bed up to Panamint Springs, which was 126 degrees. And it was so hot that my shoes melted. So now we're past that. The sun is going. I'm with one of my pacers, and I look again to the left, and I see a woman again. And I said, you see her? And he says, what are you talking about? And I looked, and I saw a woman with bushy hair, swinging her arms, and I saw her eyes. They're bright eyes. It was if there was sun, projecting eyes into the horizon. And I said, "You see, there's a woman right there. Do you see her on the hill?" And he said, "Man, if there was something there, I'd tell you, but there ain't nothing there." And I immediately got scared, and I burst into tears. And I couldn't look that way. I said, I make it go away. I can't look over there. I can't look over there. I can't look over there. And my pacer, his name is Jeremy, bless his heart. He said, Jesus, come down, be with us. Jesus, come down, be with us. And I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified. And I kept looking back, and it was there. It was a woman, and it was very, very terrifying. And so I just looked at Jeremy and I said, we got to get out of here. And we have got to get out of here. And I booked it to the crew vehicle. And so I didn't really know what it was. A big part of me knew that it wasn't there, but an even bigger part of me was positive that it was there, that there was a woman there. And it wasn't until after the race, and I had gotten 2 nights, and we were on our way back to the airport in Las Vegas, and we were driving through the course in reverse, that I saw it, and it was a big cactus with holes in it. And it looked like a woman, and the sun was going down, so there was sunlight going through the holes that made it look like eyes. And I thought it was a woman. It was terrifying.
Wow.
So that was the scariest. And so so sometimes, like hallucinations they're just part of the sport. And many times they're not real. It's just visual fatigue, right? So I've seen trees get up and walk with me, down the trail. That's no big deal. But this was actually pretty terrible. So I'll never forget.
But see, I love a sport where you go, I've had trees walk down with me, but that's no big deal.
That happened 2 years ago at the Tunnel Hill 100. I looked over and a tree got up, walked down, and then just stopped. And I just looked and I said, that's not real. And so that was normal.
I just realized I can never be a pacer or a crew member for anybody because I'd just be too tempted to screw with them. Is that a woman? Yep, and she's coming after you.
Oh my God. It's weird, just even listening to myself narrate it. It sounds ridiculous. It's like, how could you ever believe that there was a woman waving her arms at you with bushy hair in the desert? And maybe it was because a seed was kind of planted that there was actually a woman 40 miles before then. But logically, it just makes no sense. But it's just, I just got so tired and fatigued, and that it just like your mind just becomes open to these things that.
When you're that tired, you're just not thinking straight either.
And so yeah, and then I had 55 miles to go from there, roughly. So yeah, that was interesting. So that was the scariest part. The most challenging part for me was the final, 12, 13 miles. And so you get to I got to mile 122, and to get to mile 135, you have to climb up. You essentially have to go from a little over 3,000 feet to just under 9,000, and it was in the heat of the day, and so you're just going straight up, and then it levels off a little bit, and straight up, and then it levels off, and it was that was brutal. That was very, very difficult, and so if I had the number one thing for when I go back and do it again is just to become a better. I'm already a pretty good climber, but just to build that a little bit more, to focus on that a little bit more, because there's a deceptively large amount of climbing in the Badwater 135. But those are two things that I think the best part about doing long races, and this is why I keep going back to them, is like you can train and train and train, but when it comes to 100-mile races, 6 things are always going to go wrong. And it's just, how are you going to deal with those things? And you never know what they are. Like you can train for the heat, you can train for the hills, you can train for this, but then there are just things you can't plan on. And for me, if I'm looking at the spillover effects of running into my other life, it's like, oh, okay, so every day at least 6 things go wrong, and I have to deal with it, and I'm better able to do that now. So that's why I like the 100-mile disc so much.
That kind of follows along with kind of my mantra of you control what you can and manage what you can't. Just like what you said, there's going to be 6 things that goes wrong. What's that thing that you tell yourself that whenever you think you're done and you want to quit? What's that switch in your mind that you turn that allows you to keep going?
What I try to do, and I'm not always successful, is just to say that this is temporary. Like it always gets better. always gets better. You just have to stick around for it. And so I've had some profoundly large bonks, but you can always unbonk in ultramarathons. You can always unbonk. And so whether it's, you sit in a chair for an hour, you eat something, eat a lot, you do something else, and you can always unbonk. And so that's what I tell myself. It's only on one occasion have I really quit because I wasn't having fun. On every other occasion, I was either pulled from the race medically, or I got really sick or something like that. But really only once was I like, this sucks. This sucks. And I don't want to do it. And I still stand by that decision. It just sucks. And I have no qualms about that one.
You got such a positive attitude that's your superpower there. I mean, I believe just that positive attitude. Sometimes I lose that, and I need to do better at that.
Oh, everybody struggles with that. I do, but for me, I always go into I every year, I say, okay, I've got a couple of big races that I'm going to focus on. And this year, it was Marathon des Sables and Badwater. Those are two big races that I've always wanted to do. And I knew that there was a possibility I might only get to do them once in my life. And so going into them, I only had, really two rules. One was to stay positive the entire time, no matter what. No matter how much I wanted to be negative, I had to stay positive. And then the second thing was just to never ever quit. And no matter how much I wanted to never even entertain the idea. Once you start, before the event, it's just, that's not even on the. And so, yes, so those are the two things, stay positive, never quit, and then always just try to have a good time. Because I don't do this for a job. I'm not a professional runner. I never want to become a professional runner. I'm not fast enough, definitely, but I never want to make a career out of this. I'm here just to supplement the rest of my life with.
I think we need to come up with our own product and call it Unbonk.
Unbonk?
Trademark.
Trademark.
It's funny you mentioned that, Steve, because that's not from me. So I actually got that from a podcast that I was listening to on my first 100-mile race. It was called the Hallucination 100. And I was listening to, I believe it was Trail Runner Nation.
Okay, yeah.
And it was an interview with a guy named Carl Meltzer, who's like the king of 100 miles. Mm-hmm. And he used that term. He said, no matter what, you can always unbonk. And I was literally bonking in a 100-mile race. And he was telling me that no matter what, in a 100-mile race, you can always unbonk. And I said, all right, Carl, I believe you. And I unbonked and I finished.
That's cool. I actually wanted to ask, though, about your experience at Rocky Raccoon, because, that's a 100-mile race, 60 miles in. Did you trip? That's
yeah, so I don't know. Have you guys ever done Rocky?
No, it's on my list, but I have not yet.
There's another one I got to do.
It's loops, so it's 20-mile loops, and it's a big race. There are lots of people there, so you have lots of support, and you see people frequently. You can buddy up with people, and so I did the first 3 loops, and I was making pretty good time. I think I came through the first 50 miles on my watch in 10 hours and 23 minutes or so, or something like that. And so I was making decent. And then, but it's it's not a very hilly course, but there are lots of routes on it because you're going through, all these very lush forests. And so you have to learn how to pick your feet up. And when I get tired, I don't pick my feet up like I should. I'm not a great trail runner. I'm much better on the roads. And on non-technical terrain. But anyway, so with Rocky, what happened was I was running along right around mile 60, right at the end of that loop. And my foot came down on a big root. And it felt as if the back of my leg was hit by a sledgehammer. And I had no idea what it was. I never had a run-in before. I've never been injured before or since. And this is not an overuse injury. This is just a trauma related injury. And it was just profoundly. But you're on the trails, you fall, you hit roots all the time. It's just no big deal. You just keep going. But this was different. I noticed that for some reason, it was impossible for me to run. Like I could hobble, I could shuffle, but I couldn't run. Like no matter how much I wanted to. And I had power in my legs, but I just couldn't do it. And I didn't know what had happened. But what I did know is that the year before, I had been pulled from that race at mile 44. I started having spasms in my back, and I had to go to the hospital. And so the medical people said, you can't go on. And so it had been 1 year that I had been thinking, I've got to get some redemption at Rocky Raccoon. And I'd flown down there by myself. We had a 3-week-old baby that we had adopted. And here I am at mile 60, and I got to finish no matter what. And I looked at my watch and I said, I have enough time. All I have to do is keep. And so I simply counted down the miles. And I said, can you count to 40, Nathan? You can count to 40. And so I just put my iPod on and I walked as fast as I possibly could. And I only had to walk for another 17 hours.
Oh, wow.
Only.
And I could finish. And when I finished, and I still had no idea what had happened. And it took, you're a little sore after 100 miles, but this is different. And like, I couldn't even pick my foot up off of the ground. And then what happened is as I got home and I was wearing like some sport pants, and my leg started expanding so much that I couldn't even wear those. Oh. And my leg turned black. And so I thought, this is probably not good. So I went to the hospital, and I just by coincidence had a doctor in the ER who ran one marathon in the 70s. He ran the Boston Marathon. And he looked at me, he said, are you telling me that you did 40 miles on this leg? And I said, yes, I did. And he said, you tore your entire calf. We're going to get you some crutches and you'll be on these for 6 weeks. And I said, no problem. I got my buckle. So for me, it was just like, there was no choice. It was just, okay. So that was just one of the 6 problems that I had in that race. And it was just like, just go, just do it. Now, was that the smart thing to do? Probably not. But I was blessed by having no idea what had actually happened. And for me, my motto is, unless they're going to pull you, just get back out there. Let the race tell you when you're going to quit, because you are not a good authority figure when it comes to your ability to actually finish a race.
That's good advice.
Yeah, because I mean, it's deep down. I think, when people ask me about 100-mile races and races that are longer than 100 milers, or 50 milers or 50, they say, those aren't good. Running 100 miles at once in a day isn't good for you. And I'd say, you're right. But the training is very good. Mm-hmm. And the other things that you get from it is those things are exceptional. And so, yeah, maybe the races aren't that good for you. And maybe this wasn't good for me. But I tell you what, I'm never going to be 75 years old in a rocking chair thinking to myself, if I had just kept going, I could have done it. Mm-hmm. Maybe I could have done it. Like I'll never have that. And that's, I'm grateful.
And usually the people telling you that's bad for you are the ones that are eating the Big Mac and have a Camel non-filter and a 300-ounce Mountain Dew in their hand. So, or the former me.
Honestly, for me, and I would never, a lot of it is the people who love me the most, mm-hmm. who aren't runners, and they're just like, really? Like, I have 2 older sisters, and neither of them are runners. But they're both really good people. Mm. And so when they hear stories, it's upsetting to them, and they just say, oh, Nate, Natey, they call me Natey. They're like, oh, Natey, oh, that just sounds awful. Like, are you sure you want to keep doing these? And I say, yes, I do.
So I'm curious, what are your thoughts on kind of motivation versus self-discipline?
Oh, I think that they're 2 sides of the same coin. I mean, they're like, you have to have a sufficient motivation to control your impulses, and you have to have the ability to do so, and they work together. And so what happens is, I think motivation can light the spark, And but over time, what happened, at least in my experience, and I do a little bit of research on this as well, is that, over time, what once took a lot of work no longer takes any work. In fact, our bodies and our minds are set up so that we have to spend as little energy as possible. And so that's why I think the biggest excitement with running that most people have, and that I definitely had, was very early on, right? Where it's like you go from, I can't do anything, like I'm on the couch, to, oh my gosh, I just ran 8 miles. Like, can you imagine that? Like, I didn't know people did that. I'll never forget my first 8-mile run back when I was running. It was like the coolest thing ever. And it was so painful. I was like, I don't know if I have another one of these in me. And so, but then I did another one and another one and another one. And then it became the 20-mile distance. I saw that on my first marathon training program. I thought about it all week. And I was watching YouTube videos of people after they had run 20 miles on a training, and they all looked happy. And I thought, oh, okay, so I wonder if I can do this. And then I did it. And I was like, man, that was cool. It hurt. And I came home and I took an ice bath. Like my wife, got all of this ice from our freezer, put it in the bathtub. I hopped in. I don't do that anymore. But I just did it over and over again. And so for me, I think all of us have different ability, but I think all of us have enough to do quite a bit, and to do way more than we give ourselves credit for. And then most of it is just like I was telling Andy, is just find that thing that lights the spark and then do it. Like, no matter what, just do it. And then do it again and do it over and over again until you want a bigger spark. Because man, oh man, the coolest thing about this is that we have unlimited upgrades. Like, no, you cannot, like, I mean, you think about it and you can do it. And I think that's a pretty cool thing.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because a couple of months ago, I was in a bit of a running funk. I mean, I had to really force myself to get out and run. I didn't want to. It never got better. I was in a funk. And I was thinking about it. It's like, you mentioned, you did that first 8-mile run. When you first start running, you have all these accomplishments that are happening like that. Boom, 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 boom. But now I've gotten to the point where that accomplishment takes so much longer to achieve. My first 100-miler, it's basically a year of training, to get to that next goal. Yeah, I mean, all of us can go run a half marathon, not a PR time, but probably right now. We could probably walk out the door and get 13.1. And I was just thinking that, that's I think that's kind of what part of my funk was, that I wasn't achieving anything in my mind. And I don't know, do any of you ever get that, or is it just me? It's probably just me.
Oh, I certainly get like that all the time. And really, this training cycle where I've been spending a lot of time at the track doing that speed work, it's something different. It's something new. And I'm kind of chasing pace goals rather than distance goals now. And so that's something that's really gotten me excited. And that's kind of a new spark for me. And so, and that's one of the great things is you can always chase a time. You can always do better for yourself. Some people are past their prime and when they're going to be getting PRs. And so, you need to look at those new things and, start looking at age groups and different ways to get yourself better there, or just different training techniques, or do a triathlon. Ha!
But you don't swim.
You got to get wet.
I want to hear about your stuff, Crystal. I've been doing all the talking here.
No. Well, I think for me, I went through it, but my big thing is when I first started out running, I mean, I achieved things fairly quickly. I mean, my first race was a half marathon, BQ to my second one. And then I kind of peaked, and then it kind of leveled out from there. And then after having my son, my plans were to run all through my pregnancy. I was going to be like that crazy fit lady, see at the races that you're afraid is going to give birth any second. And I unfortunately had some complications and I couldn't do it. So I knew this was going to be my only child. And so I really enjoyed pregnancy. I did, drive through McDonald's in my pajamas and I gained about 50 pounds, and I'm 5'1", so that's a whole lot. And then when you have a baby and find out it's not a 50-pound baby that comes out, it's a little depressing and you're completely out of shape and you try and get back. And I had a real bad on and off love affair again with running, where it was really depressing because I kept comparing the now me to the old me. And it was really hard. And it took me really years to get past that point and really just enjoy where I am now. And I'm finally at that point that just everything it's a joy. It's a joy to get out there. It's a joy to train. It's a joy to get up at 4:00 in the morning. Like I'm just in this very happy, positive, sweet spot, but it was a struggle.
Oh yeah. I think, for me, there are always ups and downs. I think, for me, one thing that I try to do is to not even think about how I feel most of the time, and definitely to, wait until I'm done with the first mile in any training run to see if I'm having a good time. Like I just need to get the first mile done. And then usually after that, I'm fine. But that's just like, oftentimes that's the hardest thing for me. And another thing that I really, fail to recognize is how, running is just part of this, life stew that I'm cooking, and that when I add stress to stew, it's going to affect my running. And when I take it away, it's going to affect the running as well. And so, one thing that, so I had a similar situation when I have a 3-month-old and, baby Ellis, and we adopted both of our children from birth. And, Ellis was literally born the day after I arrived back from MDS, Marathon des Sables. And so I was actually flying back from Morocco, and I was on the Wi-Fi on an international flight, Facebook messaging with my wife, who said, the baby's going to come today. And I said, I can make it. And I changed my flight on the way home, and I made it. And I was there for the birth of my son. And then I had literally, a 1-minute-old baby in my arms, which is like the coolest thing ever, right? I mean, it's what I've always done my entire life. And what I also have is, some recovery from Marathon des Sables. And I've got this little race called the Badwater coming up in July that I also have to train for, like I've never trained for any other race in my life. And so that was a big, that was a challenge. I can't say that I've had a more challenging time with training. I got all my training in. I did a ton of training, but just managing everything work-related, family-related, and running-related, and just my other stuff that I do for fun, than these last 3 months. And so now with recovery from Badwater, oh my gosh, I had a life-changing experience at the race, but man, oh man, we just booked our tickets to Disney World, like it's like the Badwater Ultramarathon. What are you going to do? We're going to Disney World. That was literally what we did, as I was, getting ready to talk with you tonight is, we're going over Thanksgiving or right before Thanksgiving.
Now, I want to, if I can, just maybe poke your professional brain for a moment.
Yeah.
We joke a lot on the show and other places that runners in general, ultra runners in particular, we've all got to be screwed up in the head someplace to do these things. But with that said, there are a lot of ultra runners who suffer from depression, former drug addiction, that type of thing. Is this endeavor, is it a long-term, I hate to use the word cure, but I'll just use that word, cure for people that suffer from that type of stuff?
I wouldn't call it a cure.
Yeah, that's a bad word.
I would call it so the short answer is that we have yet to find any evidence of exercise hurting people's mental health. It just doesn't. And I mean, if you can find any evidence that it really, really hurts, that it makes you more depressed, more anxious, all of that sort of stuff, long term, then it's very difficult. It's very difficult to find that. In contrast, there's a ton of evidence on the benefits of aerobic exercise, specifically on alleviating symptoms of mild depression and anxiety. In fact, at very, again, mild levels of depression, it's as good as specific serotonin reuptake inhibitors and other sort of medications and talk therapy. And so At no point would I ever say, stop taking your meds, stop going to your counselor, and just run 100 miles. I would never, ever say that. But what I would say is that it's a wonderful thing to do to help your mental health. Now, it's not a surprise then that people who might be most at risk for experiencing those things would flock to what might make them feel better. And so people who get the blues, people who, struggle with genuine, major depressive disorder, people who are anxious around other people, people who are just anxious, are always sort of living life at a free, like a near boil. Yeah, running helps them. And I've seen it. When it comes to things like substance disorder, I think the base rate again is probably higher in the running population, especially the ultra running population, than what you would find in the general population. So maybe the general population, we have, one or maybe 1 out of 10 people become, for example, dependent on alcohol. In the ultra running population, it might be 2 out of 10. It's not 8 out of 10. It's maybe double what you would find. But the key is that in the ultra running population, people are way more likely to talk about it than you are in the general population. So when you see people at the supermarket, you don't say, hey, by the way, I got 3 DUIs when I was in college. And, that just usually doesn't come up. Or even, you work with people for years and you don't know their past. And you don't need to, because it's not part of your job. But I tell you what, you get someone on the trails with you for 10 hours and you're hallucinating and you're hungry and you don't know what's going on. And suddenly, you know everything. There are very few barriers and it's a much safer environment to share stuff. And so I think the base rate is higher because people who want some improvement are going to be drawn toward what's going to help them. And then the second thing is just the environment sort of lends itself towards sharing our personal lives in a way that I haven't been able to replicate in any other area of my life.
Interesting.
I think that's absolutely true because what happens on the road or trail stays on the trail. And I've had a lot of really deep personal conversations with some friends of mine, things coming from myself and also from them. I've spoke, about their children, how they're worried about that. I've had one individual say the pills went down the sink yesterday because I'm done with that. And then I had one person that he had just got out of a drug treatment center and he joined our running group because that was an excellent coping mechanism for him. And it also got him around some real positive people. And so, I can definitely see the draw of someone who may have some mental health issues, depression or chemical addictions or something like that. That the running community is absolutely the place that you need to be to get you through some tough times.
Oh, definitely. I know even for me, I never had substance abuse problems. Well, high school years don't count, but before I started running, I was a hothead. I mean, I wasn't violent, but I would, blow my stack at the drop of a dime. And since I've been running, I'm the calmest, coolest, most of the time person you're ever going to meet. So I was just wondering how that applied to more serious conditions. And I want to thank you for the answer there.
Yeah, I hope it helps.
We'll have to put that on our resume, Andy, since we are Ozark scientists.
We are scientists.
Hey, and I said I got a PhD too, Palmetto High School diploma.
Yeah, we want to talk a little bit too. I know that you have done some research into narcissism. When you were studying it had to do a lot to do with the difference between pop music in the 80s coming into the 2000s. I think you were looking at 2007. And so we're kind of wondering about narcissism and runner. So a lot of people, you say like a lot of people from the outside, they see it as a very self-absorbed endeavor, and that runners are kind of like this real narcissistic type of people. But then, we talked about being on the inside. It's just some of the nicest, most genuine, giving people. So just kind of curious on your take on it all.
Yeah. I've done, so I did the pop music stuff. I've also done a fair amount of research on narcissism and aggression as well. And, what happens in the narcissistic brain when they get upset and things like that. And narcissists are really fragile people. So they do not do well with setbacks. And so, I think at some level, I do agree that many runners, or I should say some runners, appear narcissistic. And by that, I mean, there are different ingredients that make up what we call narcissism. And I think the biggest one, and one that I don't think many runners have, is entitlement. So of course you're going to give me this. Of course you're going to give me something else. It's going to be great to get the respect that I deserve. You don't see a lot of runners. Where I do see runners more and more, especially as social media becomes more and more popular, and as the running community sort of partners with social media, there is a lot of stuff related to narcissism and how you look. And it's not just how you look and wanting to look good, but it's wanting to showcase your looks to other people. And so I see, runners all the time, literally posting daily selfies on social media. And it's not just pictures of themselves with other people. It's just, this is me, like this is me alone. Or this is me running, which involves putting the camera down and timing it and then running in front of your camera and doing that. When you think about that, like, I think a lot of times people don't really realize, do you know what went into that photo? There's a lot of planning that went into that photo, and the end result is me. And then I'm going to show it to you. And what you find is that people are actually doing a lot of research on this now, is that the more people post selfies, the more narcissistic they become. And so I think if there's anything with running and narcissism, I think it's probably comes in the opposite direction. That is, people get excited about running. They want to show themselves doing X, Y, or Z in a given location. They're posting selfies, and then they get attention from that, and they get whatever you get from that. And then they do it over and over again. And over time, they become more narcissistic. I think that happens, though, to a very small percentage of the running population. But that's where I see it. Now, are all running, is running a selfish act? No. Does it, when you think of narcissism, and specifically narcissistic personality disorder, that's something that really decimates all of your relationships. It's almost impossible to have a long-term rewarding relationship with a true narcissist. And those are the people who get kicked out of running groups. And so I wouldn't say that running has a narcissism problem. What I'd say is that simply the environment, especially the virtual environment in which we find ourselves, can breed narcissism. But I don't think that, runners, I think probably aren't drawn to it for that reason.
Now, podcasters, whole different story. We are available for your research.
It's a delicate balance. So I post stuff on social media, and I love running. I love my friends. I love the places that I get to go. I've a rule on Facebook that it's family, friends, and fun. Those are the only things I will ever post. And for me, so I don't post work-related stuff. I don't post politics-related stuff. Just family, friends, and fun. And for me, a lot of the fun that I have is on the trails with people or on the roads with people. And so I do post stuff from races, but I think that if my memory is correct, I've done 2 selfies. And both of those selfies were promoting somebody else in the ultra running community. So anyway, I don't think you'll find me, posting myself running along the highway, anytime soon.
Crystal, you and I need some therapy.
I know. All the things he's describing, I'm like, I've done that. I've done that.
It's different. No. It's marketing for the podcast.
Yeah,
so what I'm telling myself, yes.
No, but I was going to say that's one of the things that I've always appreciated about Nathan too, because, we're Facebook friends and stuff, and I loved how you just have that combination of everything. So when you finished Marathon des Sables, there was, you had your real cool, I guess it was the official picture that was out there. And then the next picture was you and Bevy having like either a dance party or tea party with, the presidential Pez. And
oh, yes. Yes.
And so it's that nice balance.
Yeah, I try to do that.
All right, Nathan, we have one last question for you, and then we'll let Miss Crystal close the show out. So you've run Tunnel Hill last year, the 100, and you coming back again this year?
Yep.
Okay. What's your best advice you have for Crystal and I?
So I've done the Tunnel Hill 100 mile the past 2 years. And the number one thing that I would recommend is you try to stay warm because it gets very cold and you're not going to be used to it yet. It happens right at the middle of November where none of us are used to running in the cold yet. So none of us really know how to dress for it or prepare for it. And it also happens right when the daylight savings. And so it's going to get darker an hour earlier than you're used to. And so both of those were very big the first time I did it. Last year I came back and I prepared a lot better. So I brought a lot more clothes and I also did a much better job changing clothes because you get wet. And if I don't know if you guys have run lots of 100 milers, late in the race, you're moving slower. And so if you're moving slower in wet clothes, you're going to get hypothermic and your race is going to be over and you're dead. So I change clothes. So you do the first 50 and then you come back and you do it all over again. Same route. So you basically go back, you go up, back, and then back to the start, and then you do it again. And so what I did last year, what I would recommend doing is you get to this part, which is, 13 miles, and you have a drop bag there and just take your top off and put a dry top on and layers on, and then move back. You're going to get back to the, back here to the start finish. And you're only going to have, I think you're going to be over mile 80. So you're going to have less than 20 miles to do at that point. And so now the race is yours. Change again. And then, and keep eating, move down, come back, and you're done. And the race is over. And so that's the number one thing I think that kills people is you get done with the 50 and your car is right there and it's getting cold and it's dark and you don't want to go. And that's why most people quit. And for me, the first year that I ran, I was so tired and so cold that I think it was one of the only times that I've been in real danger in a race where I remember looking down at the trail and I think I was like 85 miles into the race. It was freezing cold. It was, 30 degrees or so. And I thought to myself, you know what? I think I'm just going to lay down and take a short little nap. And then immediately I thought, that's what people say before they die. Like the people on the prairie, I'm from Nebraska, like you hear about people dying, back in the 1800s. And I was like, okay, so I probably don't want to do that. So I just kept walking. But I was still miserably cold. And I had stopped, and for whatever reason, I just decided to stop eating for about 9 miles. And it was very, very, very miserable. So I did a better job the second year, and I hope to do a much better job this year.
You got any time goal in mind, or?
Last year I squeaked under 23 hours. So I did like 22:57 or so. And I'd like to go at least a little bit faster than, but we'll see. I mean, you never know. I mean, you never ever know. But right now, my number one priority is recovery, and then putting myself at a spot where I can actually train for Tunnel Hill instead of just sort of try to make it through it. Because, like 50K, 50 mile, you can, in my experience, you can sort of fake your way through it. You can get through it on marathon training. But 100 mile is just something completely different, and it will just chew you to bits. By the time you hit mile 75, if you're not adequately. And so, I'm doing a reverse taper right now, some light running, and hopefully, build back up to, good mileage and good quality, and put myself in a position where I get there healthy and ready to run quick.
All right. We look forward to seeing you up there.
Yeah, it'll be great.
All right. Beers on Crystal.
Yeah, I think I'm actually going to have kind of a reunion of both my tent mates at Marathon des Sables. Many of them are going to fly into Tunnel Hill, and then all 4 members of my Badwater crew I think are going to be there too. So it's going to be
how fun.
A reunion of sorts. So and that's what the best part about ultra running is. You get to see people, a few times a year, but you catch up and you see each other every day.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know even just, the amount of people we met just at Ruts, it's like amazing, and building friendships from there. And you're right. It's just a big family.
Yes, it's great.
Wonderful. Does anybody have any other questions?
Think I'm good.
All right. So if you want to stay in touch with Nathan, you can follow him on Twitter. He is CN DeWall. On Instagram, where you won't see a whole lot of selfies, it is Nathan DeWall. And he also has a website that is nathandewall.com. And we will put all that information in the show notes. Also, a reminder about our Facebook group. We are getting ready to cap that soon. So if you want in, you need to get in soon. Or you have to wait until what, guys?
Somebody dies.
And then, so we do have some exciting stuff coming up because our 1-year anniversary is coming up soon. So we're going to have some information about that. And as always, just stay in touch, join our Facebook group. And I don't have our voicemail number in front of me. Do you have that?
Our voicemail is area code 417-319-1060. So you can leave us a message about what you like, what you don't like, some gear reviews, some running routes, whatever, and you might hear yourself on the air.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, everybody. And thanks so much for listening. And until next time, I'm Crystal.
I'm Andy.
And I'm Steven.